My mantra this year became, you can do hard things. And even when you want everything to stay the same because it's easier there, things are going to change. And you have to be the version of you that can continually navigate those changes with a lot more resourcefulness. You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 420. And today I'm sharing a special episode about what 2024 taught me, again, about business growth, resilience, and mindset, and how it's going to help establish me for a breakthrough year. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, business owners, expert entrepreneurs, and ripple makers. It's your host, Melanie Benson. And happy holidays. As we're recording this, we are in the holiday season, leaving 2024 and moving into 2025. And this is a really special episode. This has been a very transformative year for me. A lot of stuff personally, but also a lot of stuff professionally and in business. And I don't know about you, but I love hearing what's going on behind the scenes in other marketers. It makes me feel less alone, less like something's maybe unique about me. I mean, look, we're all having growth. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what the growth opportunities were for me this year. And some of them were very challenging. I'm going to bookend this a little bit with personal at the beginning and the end. And I hope you find this inspiring. I'd love to hear if there's something that speaks to you in this episode today, or it really gave you some peace with where you're at in your own process and your own journey around business, that you let me know. Drop into whatever your favorite social media platform is and give me a little shout out in the DMs, or hey, you can even share the episode and tag me in it, even better. So I've got 7 key insights, if you will, that came from this year. Some of the stuff I've learned over and over and over again. Does that ever happen to you where it's like, oh, I'm learning this lesson again. Great. Thought I was done with it. And the first one was probably the single biggest, most challenging area that I faced. And that's every leap, every growth, all the evolution can generate fallout. So you've probably heard the saying, every new level releases a new devil. That really has to do with the mindset. What I notice, and in my discussions with my support system and my mentors, what I found was that every new leap literally can generate fallout. And here's what I think happens. First of all, energetically, on a frequency level, just imagine that when you're tuning into a new type of way of being, right? And that way of being has a certain frequency, and you're leaving behind an older frequency pattern. Anything that you made decisions about from that older frequency may or may not align with the frequency that you're stepping into. Just think of every thought pattern and situation and environment and opportunity is really at a certain frequency level. So what I notice about myself, again, because I've had this learning many times, is that as I was calling in a new leap and I was setting my sights on some growth, that there were some decisions I made from a different energetic frequency that were not working. And anytime I had made a decision from a place of fear or a place of not enoughness, or from a place of like, oh my God, I have to fix a problem, it literally stopped working. And I had to dig deep and get into a really deep space of resilience at sometimes. A lot of this happened with team. Now, I have some amazing team members that have gone the distance with me because they adapt and grow with me. And I really think it's because I brought them on at a time of deep resourcefulness. But there were team members that I struggled filling their spots. Now, I have some theories, and I'm not going to make this about anyone being wrong, but I have a theory about where some people are in their journey, and some people are kind of side hustling their way through. And I seem to be attracting a lot of people that were side hustling the role that I had, and it was causing them to not really be able to lean fully into the level of accountability and role. And what I noticed is that I had brought them on at a time when I had some lack of clarity about where I was taking things. And so that lack of clarity manifested in kind of some wobbly boundaries and standards. And as I became aware of that, nobody had to be wrong, but I was like, okay, this just isn't aligned. And there became a energy of intolerance. I was actually doing some pretty profound energy work. I have lots of tools in my toolbox. I have lots of different ways I get supported. And so, yeah, I was doing some energy work. I was getting a reading with a very well-known woman who can channel energetic like blocks, like where those blocks are. And like the word intolerance just kept coming up. And all of a sudden, I could see every place that I had these tolerations, whether they were really clear to me, or there was just okay, something about that is like having a really heavy energy. And I knew I had to make some really hard decisions. That is part of when you make a leap, you have to let go of things that are no longer in alignment, even when it's inconvenient to do it. One of our big leaps this year was we went from using Keep for 15 years to moving into a Go High Level product called Funnel Gorgeous. And yes, the leap was hard. It was scary. It took way more time and energy and money than I anticipated. And part of it was because I didn't plug in the right team member early enough so that what we were establishing was going to be coming from a place of power and solidification rather than like, okay, well, let's see if we can figure this out. So this is kind of set with me quite a bit this year is what is the leap I'm making? And what do I have to be willing to let go of so that I either have the space for it, or I'm not distracted by it, or I'm not tolerating something that can't go where I'm going next. Now, one of the things you can ask yourself if you suspect, okay, I've been shooting for this next level, I'm calling in, a higher level client or a higher level of like money or impact, like you really know this is the year to kind of get your ripple making machine in place, whatever that is for you, you can ask yourself, what would have to change so that that new level was easy for me? And when I was asking myself that question towards the beginning of the year, I always kept coming back to, I don't feel like the team's right. I don't feel like the team's right. Now, another thing, just in the spirit of kind of painting the full picture that played into all of this, is I had some team members for a really long time. And the documentation that supported those roles was not matching the role they had evolved over time and they had adapted into. And one of the things that we had to commit to be prepared for that next level team and that next level level of harmony and flow in our operations was we needed better documentation. So I literally invested heavily over the summer, which is typically a slower month for a lot of us, in getting the SOPs and the operational handbook, if you will, in place. Did I want to? No. I did not want to spend money and time on that. Was it essential? Yes. Because in order to have less tolerations, less breakdown, less things that were not working, I had to be willing to invest in more clarity, more structure, and a next level operational system. Now, it's not perfect yet, but it's way better than it was. So first, really big insight is how many things you have to evaluate when you're getting ready to make the leap, and what you need to be aware of when you feel like there's tension between the leap that you're making and you keep getting pulled back. Like think of it like a rubber band. It's like when you're stretching the rubber band, in the theory that you are transforming into a new version of you, you're going to stretch that rubber band to the point where it breaks and it cannot go back to its old shape. Okay, you're breaking through it. But if you don't break that, what happens is the rubber band slingshots you back into where you were. And that's what happens when you have team, clients, offers, a business model that's so entrenched in the way you're doing things now that it cannot sustain the breakthrough in that next level. So you have to look at what has to be true for this next level to be anchored in that new reality and allow me to grow forward. We did have other things that we shifted. We recalibrated how we do Authority Accelerator going into the new year. We introduced a new offer to really support our clients and continuing the momentum and the work once they graduated that. So yes, there was a few things that we had to address. Was it painful? Yeah, at times. It was hard. I feel like my brain was going to melt. And going into the new year, I'm really excited about what's possible. So just know you're not alone if you're feeling that fallout. Now, let me get into the second one. This is again an insight. And this comes from my mindset of in business, you're always testing, tracking, and tweaking. So I've been teaching Authority Accelerator for, I guess it's been like 3 years now in this particular form. And I had a huge awareness in my messaging, in my own messaging, right? Because this is a big part of what we do. And I was leading with a very different message for a while, something that was very catchy. It was really grabbing attention, which is what your lighthouse message should do. But I wasn't calling it a lighthouse message. And here's what I discovered through testing and tracking is that there was something about that message, which was wrapped up in this idea that there's $1 million visibility streams that we can borrow to get in front of new audiences and to not just to borrow those audiences and be able to tap into them to help build our own audiences, but what happens in that compounding effect. So this is what happened in my own process with the messaging is something felt off about it, right? And we were kind of like maxed out and getting enrollments way below what I wanted to attract into the program. And I was having this random conversation with a friend of mine who's a brilliant marketer. And he's like, I kind of feel like the message you're putting out is out of sync with what your ideal clients want. And I reflected on that. So when you are doing messaging, you really want to reflect on what is it that your ideal clients want. And so I went back and I looked at what was the draw for my most favorite clients that got them out of just kind of studying me and staying connected on social media or in my email list and literally moved them into action. And I realized they felt disconnected from their message. And one day, and this is what happens around messaging for me, it's fun when it happens with my clients, but it happened for me. All of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, my clients need a lighthouse message. And that I put that message out. I literally generated so many leads when I started talking about messaging from that perspective. And I was like, okay, I get it. And so I invested in a lot of money to pivot our core signature framework and our messaging system to reflect that. So here's the insight. First of all, everyone benefits from having a lighthouse message, from you for your client enrollments, to your partners because they know how to refer you better, to your client base because they know when they need you, because your lighthouse message cuts through the noise. But you got to be willing to experiment to find it. And it needs to light you up. Okay. So if it's not happening right now and your message is not doing the heavy lifting, it's not attracting the right people. It's not attracting enough people, or by the time they get to you, they're still wishy-washy about working with you. Your message isn't in the right frequency yet. It hasn't gotten that right spark. It should be doing 80% of the selling before they ever get to you. Okay, so I really had this message this learning come home for me this year. So the third insight, and I'm actually going to do a whole episode on this next, is when you try to grow alone, it's hard, but collaboration and co-creating opportunity with peers who share your audience really speeds up audience building and client attraction. And not just any client attraction, but ideal client attraction. So I've known this for years. I built my business on this, but I got to tell you, it got really hard for a while. So I spent a few years not really doing a lot of this. And yes, the podcast is a form of that, but that was really the only thing I was doing. Well, as we entered into 2024, I got very intentional about this and it paid off. Paid off big time for me. I started seeing double the enrollments in my master classes. I started seeing higher quality, high value client leads going from entering into my email list to buying really quickly. And they were not like debating and feeling frustrated by my price points. And I think there is a distinction between list building and aligned collaboration with partners who really do serve your ideal audience. So that was a key insight. I'll unpack that a little bit more in the next episode. Insight number 4. Again, a learning opportunity to relearn the importance of optimizing what works versus always creating something new and really understanding the cost and the return on investment for creating. Now, my personality is I like to cling to what works. I will own that. I really like creating a system and then doing the system over and over again. But I also get these sparks of inspiration, and I've been learning to trust them. But sometimes those sparks of inspiration turn into a landslide, or maybe I should even call it an avalanche of work. And that happened for me this year again. Moving from our tried and true CRM system, even though we had some problems with it, and going into something new, it was a much bigger learning curve than we were prepared for. Okay. I knew it was going to be hard. It was harder than I thought. It was worth it in the end, but there was a lot of hair pulling moments as we went through that. But a couple other places was, when is the value of creating a new like marketing funnel? So think of a marketing funnel like, it's like the lead magnet, the masterclass. Some people are really adept at doing these things quickly. They're super consuming for me, partly because I'm a perfectionist. And about the end of summer, I knew I wanted to create a new masterclass for the fall. And I actually had a different idea of what we were going to enroll people into. And literally, we were experiencing this fallout of the things that were not of the frequency of where I was going. And I just was like, I got to call it. We're not creating this new offer. We're going to optimize the thing that we're doing already and make it a better fit for where I want to go next. Well, it was a huge win-win for everybody. But I also, at the same time, had already had in motion creating a new masterclass. And this is where I think it's just worth looking at. When do we need to create new versus when do we optimize what we did the last time? When you're optimizing, you could do tiny tweaks quickly. When you're creating something new, you got to create everything from scratch. Not only is it consuming on you as the entrepreneur, but your team gets involved. They get pulled off other things. We had to look at priorities and go, what's really the priority? I had to put stuff on pause that I really wanted to do and I couldn't do because we didn't have the bandwidth. And even if I had thrown more money at it and had new people come on board, it still would have been messy and overwhelming. And guess what? I was not in my best mode because my brain starts to melt when things get overwhelming. I don't know. Does that happen to you too? So here is kind of where I landed with all this, is having more of a checklist and a vetting process around, is this something we're willing to create from scratch? Is there benefit in it? Or do we need to optimize what we've already done? And really looking at the fastest path to getting what we want and letting go of this obsession that sometimes comes up of, I need to have something fresh. Now, here is one thing to consider. The masterclass we did here in December, it did really well. We had a lower attendance because it was in December, but we had more applications coming through than we ever have before. So there can be a payoff. You just have to ask yourself, is the payoff worth it? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on creating new versus optimizing. Is this a superpower for you? Or do you find, like I find, that sometimes you're in a rabbit hole of like, oh my gosh, so many things have to get fixed to really get this new thing to market. Is it worth it? And maybe sometimes you just want to tweak and refine the thing that's already working so it works better. Insight number 5. And this was actually a little bit more on my personal level. If you want bigger, bolder results, you have to expand your capacity for bigger. I've shared about this before on the podcast, expanding our energetic capacity for more. And actually, it was one of the most downloaded podcasts from the summer. I'll link it up here if you want to go back and listen to it. What I got to come face to face with is I did not have the capacity for more before earlier this year. I've had some personal stuff that happened a few years ago. Well, I've had several personal things that happened over time. And as one of my clients calls it, I was experiencing complex grief. I had a stack of traumas that hadn't been resolved. And my energetic capacity was really compromised from some health challenges. Now, luckily, I got some new health support this year and my physicality shifted, but my mental capacity hadn't quite caught up. My body, my energetic body had not caught up. And so I really had to look at some new ways to expand my capacity for bigger results. Now, some of this can be structural, like having the right team, having the right systems, having the right business model. There can be some capacity limits around the how, but I really had to look at my physicality, my energetic presence, and my mindset around expanding my capacity for bigger. I did a lot of really alternative work, somatics and energetics, and learning how to they call it self-soothing, like really deal with the stress level in my body that was crippling me at times. I had to make some changes in my diet. Like I eat pretty clean. If you know me, I eat pretty clean, but I was probably having a little bit too many carbs for what was good for my body. And I also just needed some more exercise. Like I needed to be more intentional about how I processed things through my body. Doing this work shifted me. And instead of like looking and focusing on the things that were broken, I started to see potential. I started to get excited about growth again. And so I would just invite you to ask this question of yourself. If you've wanted to grow your impact and you wanted to grow the reach of your work, you wanted to make more money, but you're not, is it possible that either your mindset, the beliefs you have around it, your how you carry stress in your body, or even just like your own physical well-being, maybe it's holding you back? Okay, there's nothing bad about that, but there are things you can do to shift that, to expand your container, if you will, for more. If you are resonating this with, I highly recommend you go back and listen to the Expanding Your Energetic Capacity for More from the summer. I will link it up in the show notes. But learning this again just reminds me I'm not alone, and I know a lot of people deal with this. The 6th insight points me back to this idea of when we wait for things to come our way versus being the creator of the world you want to live in, the success you want to have. Early on in my business, when I got out of my own way and I did the inner work and I got congruent with having a 6-figure plus business, I was on fire. I was a force of nature. I was not being stopped by anything. I achieved things that were just crazy big because I stopped waiting for invitations. And I like to think of it like this. You're either waiting to be invited to the big table or you're creating your own flipping table. I was creating my own table. And when I went through a really traumatic time in 2009, 2010, like I kind of put like everything back into waiting for things to come my way. I was exhausted. I was dealing with a lot. And something about this year made me aware of those little places where, yes, I was no longer going to be waiting for things to come my way. And Actually, I kind of got that lesson last year and really tuned into that. We started creating the pieces, but my energetic capacity wasn't ready for all of it. So this year became the year of creating the leap pad. And I like to think of it like creating a ripple making machine. And I started talking about that this year a lot. That was what my masterclass was. We've also opened the doors to a really awesome quiz. Like, are you ripple maker ready? Really interesting information that can come to you through that. I'll link that up in the show notes as well. But here's what I noticed in my clients, that there were way too many people holding back, waiting for clients to come their way, waiting for opportunities to come their way, waiting to be invited, waiting for something, waiting for a sign, waiting, right? And, so the kind of curiosity became, what would happen if you created your own conversation? You created your own platform. You created your own client attraction machine. Like, what would be different for you? And there's something to be said about shifting from waiting into owning, like claiming what you want and making it happen. It's such an empowered space to come from. Now, I do believe in playing with others and borrowing other people's platforms and co-creating together. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, but there becomes a time when that's not enough anymore, and you really need to own it. You need to claim your thought leadership. You need to claim your space. You need to take up space, and you need to be the space that people want to be a part of. And that's a huge part of what I teach with Ripple Makers, when people are ready for that. And it's not just like doing things for the sake of doing things, it's really doing them to make your mark, to make waves. And I feel like a lot of us are seeing, yeah, it's time to make some waves. I need to be more present if I want to make the impact I want to make. I need to be seen as more of an influential voice in this conversation. I'd love to hear if that's speaking to you, because that's where things get really exciting, right? So I'm excited about what's happening in 2025 in the coaching industry, particularly for people who are going to really step up their ripple making. Okay, last lesson. This is bookmarked. I kind of bookended things with me talking a little bit more about the personal again. One of the things that came up really, really big for me this year was toxicity and tolerations. I'm lucky I don't have much toxicity in my life. I've kind of had to put some barriers up around that in the past, and it supports me pretty well. But I think what I got this year was how our environments are either putting us into environments that allow us to thrive on autopilot or are causing us to sink on autopilot. And it comes in these little nuanced ways. And I'm going to tell you about a few things that I noticed for myself, and I'm curious if you resonate with them. There became times when I had to disconnect from social media because the conversations were toxic. And in particular, there is one platform, which is a newer platform, that's all I'll say about it, where people were using it as an opportunity to berate the coaching industry. Now, for a while, I was like, oh my God, this is toxic. I don't want to be a part of it. And then I thought, well, what happens if I establish a leadership position and I lead people to the light, so to speak? I lead people into a more positive way to think about this. And so I started focusing on the distinction between being a coach and being a marketer who offers a coaching program. No shade on marketers. I am a coach who markets, but there are very few people who are trained, certified coaches that have really learned how to market well. I chose to lead the conversation differently, but for a while it was toxic and I had to pull out. When you're in toxic environments, whether you are there participating or you're there observing, it can have a draining effect on your motivation, on your self-esteem, on your confidence, and in your motivation. You need to be in environments that position you to thrive. You should enter into environments and they should be pulling you up like a rising tide. Now, there are places when we really step into being a ripple maker that we have to contribute to the outcome either by setting a standard, which is kind of what I was doing in that conversation, or by setting boundaries. And that was a big part of my work this year, is I had to get better at setting standards, clarifying those standards, and setting boundaries around those standards. What happens if those standards are violated? What happens if those standards are not able to be upheld? I had to have some pretty tough conversations with people, some in my inner family, some of them with team members, some of them, were with clients a couple times. But here's what was so cool about this. And I want to leave on this positive, up-leveled thought. And that was the more I shared my boundaries and my standards, and I did it with love and grace, like really seeing the other people's humanness around it and having compassion and empathy, but also really being clear about what was essential and what I had to have for that relationship to continue in whatever way it was. Some amazing things shifted. I got better at it. I got more peaceful with it. I stopped feeling guilty about having to set a boundary. And I know that might sound weird coming from me, but yeah, I'm a people pleaser by training. So there was some growth I had to do around that. So as you're hearing this last lesson, I just want to ask you this question and for you to be curious with yourself. Where am I in environments that may be draining me? Okay. Now, again, sometimes those environments are draining you because how you're showing up in the story you're making up about it. But sometimes you're in environments that just aren't good for you. So are you in an environment that you need to leave, or are you in an environment that you need to establish a new standard, a new boundary, and a new way of being so you can get the best out of it? Some environments we can't leave, but we can change who we're being with them. And that's my invitation to you as we wrap up on these insights from me. Who do you need to be so you can have the business and the power and the growth and the impact and the passion and all of the things that you want to have when you feel totally congruent with your life, your business, and the impact you're having in the world? Now, if this is speaking to you, I mentioned earlier that we've opened up the Ripple Maker Readiness Quiz. I'd love to invite you to take the quiz. This could be a really interesting way to kickstart your year as you look at, am I really ready to make a big wave? Or am I ready to at least grow the reach of my ripples in the world? Do I want to have that ripple effect on the people that I'm here to serve? I'd love to hear. Go take the quiz, melaniebenson.com/quiz. Give me a little shout out. Let me know what you discover about yourself. And of course, we'll share some tools and resources to help you unpack the results you get. Thanks for tuning in. And if you've had some insights that you want to share, pop on over to where you're listening to this, or you can go to the show page, drop down into the comments, and tell us what your biggest insight was from the last year and what it's going to help you do differently going forward. Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.